what if we can do that yearly loss deployment? Every day. That would greatly speed up our continuous improvement process, would it? Hello, I'm Tom. Welcome to my channel where we discuss continuous improvement in an industrial setting. And we will be discussing a bit about loss analysis, loss deployment, because a sort of a traditional system to do this is when we're just looking at a year, we have this yearly loss deployment where we take data into, into our systems where we see losses, what is value added, what's not value added, where do we have our wastes and our losses, and all the things that we should improve. And we also determine what is the improvement potential. Because remember, not every loss is immediately attackable. Some of them are probably not even attackable, although I know zero loss mentality, we will not accept any loss, but we do know that when we're planning improvement teams, we are focusing on what we consider potential savings. So the potential to improve those KPIs, to reduce those losses is there. That is a loss deployment that traditionally is done once a year. And then from that, we develop hopefully two things. The second one is the budget. I hope that companies will move into, and I would strongly recommend you do that, into making their budget based on the loss deployment with the improvement roadmap. Because the budget for next year should not be top management saying, oh, let's reduce cost by 5%. That might be a challenge, but that should be a challenge to go into the loss deployment. And then we make an improvement plan. We say, when are we going to affect which improvements? And based on that, we budget out next year, right? Then you do it top down and you see what real operational improvements are going to lead to results. A much smarter system than just using a razor to slice off some costs here and there. But the first thing that comes out of it is that improvement roadmap. Now, some people I've heard they're always saying, let's move away from roadmaps, and I do agree that 3 to 5 year improvement roadmaps. No, my experience with them is also that's very good for creativity, but after a year you're going to change them anyway. Not too useful, but for 1 year, I still think that they are very valuable. So you plan out your 3 or 4 improvement waves. If you have a more traditional implementation of TPM or continuous improvement, you will sort of put them into waves of improvement efforts, improvement teams. It creates a couple of advantages because you start your teams at the same time, you have a celebration at the same time, you keep the timelines nice and clear, you can free up resources for it. Not everyone does it. There's definitely also an advantage to just launching teams when you are ready and sort of saying we will always have 6 teams running at the same time. Those are the resources that we make available, so as soon as a team closes out, we can deploy those resources, redeploy people to start up a new improvement effort. Works fine as well. The thing is, with those improvement waves, what you will see is that roughly here, you should be thinking ahead and looking at, okay, so are those teams that we planned for wave 2, are they still the most logical teams? But things have changed a bit. So what you basically do is this sort of mini loss deployment again. So this has led many companies to think, why don't we do that loss deployment roughly at the end of each of our waves? So 4 times or 3 times a year. Because that way we'll keep our teams fresh and active and always be focusing on the biggest potentials. And, well, if we're doing that, why not go for a weekly loss deployment or even a daily loss deployment? Why not make this into continuous loss analysis? Because, our computer systems can do it. And there are good reasons to do it. There are also a couple of reasons to be careful with it. So first off, the real loss analysis, at least the data gathering, yes, try to make that continuous. It has a couple of advantages. These are probably the main KPIs you want to track anyway. Right? So either on plant level or at the department and line level, you will need those KPIs that you use to track and deploy the losses at your plant level. Also, this is the basis of your loss analysis. It'll generally take quite a bit of time to gather all the data, especially if your plant hasn't really done these deployments before. So you take a new look at how should we analyze those operational performances in different spheres, right? So how much material did we waste, and how was the OEE of the lines compared to the labor that we put in? How do we actually know how much labor we plan? How many people do we plan in a department based on our production plan? Ooh, well, the team leaders do make a personnel plan, but how do we get the data from there? In many plants, this is quite intense, manual data gathering work. If we can automate that, we can also automate it on a weekly or a daily level. There's no real difference. As soon as you know the logic of how you get the data and it's not manually collected, as soon as you get that logic, make it nice and frequent. It will definitely help you next year during the loss deployment, because the first part, the real data collection and the first part of the analysis is already done for you. It will also, as I said, be probably your KPIs that you want to be tracking on a daily or a weekly level. So that part, the data part, definitely do it. But there was this other part in the loss deployment, and it gets us to this roadmap or team planning. And that is that we were looking at the potential. So, of course, we can also try to make rules and automate, determining improvement potential based on what we see in the losses. There are a couple of tools, when you are looking at the variation in the results, you can say, well, we sort of assume that we can always be running at the top 25% of our performance. So logically, that is the improvement potential. This gives you quite good sort of guidelines, a bit of a first setup of what the improvement potential should be. You can also benchmark it. Well, benchmarks basically just setting a target based on industry and checking where your own performance is. Doesn't mean neither the benchmark nor this own variation, although I like our own proven results more than industry benchmark, but it doesn't directly translate into these teams and into these projects, because we also do need to have some idea of what we're going to do practically, operationally, to grab that potential, to really have a useful loss deployment. Too often have I seen that, oh, these are the losses we've analyzed, and now we have a company target to reduce material loss by 12% year over year of the losses. So not of materials used, but specifically of the losses, because we've got experience in that. Our consultants told us that this is sort of doable. But if we don't know where it comes from, well, we sort of know from the loss analysis, but if we don't know how to prevent it, if we don't determine what part is attackable for us, it doesn't help us much more than that razor method of just, it's better, but it's still sort of predetermined percentages of improvement. As a target, as a guideline, it's okay, but really not enough for having your improvement planning. So that part, I think you will have a lot of difficulty making that automatic and continuous. I think for most industries and most types of losses, this will still require a lot of human input. People who know the process, people who work in the process, people with some good ideas. So you have this, and that's why in some loss deployment, weeks or 2 weeks, even if you do this process, you generally create teams, multidisciplinary teams. We have technology people, quality, engineers, operators, team leaders, also the mingling together to get those ideas, immediately sort of try, do we think that this will work? Could it have a chance? What problems do we see? What investments are needed? That's brilliant. You need that, right? You need a couple of naysayers within the group as well, a couple of free thinkers. This, I don't think you can automate, not easily. But if we are, for instance, thinking about TPM and pillars, but if you don't use TPM and pillars, you still have interest groups, you can think about having the automatic, sort of continuous loss data, but do this mini deployment much more frequently. So at least do it every cycle. But more likely, you will want to follow a whole number of them on a weekly, maybe monthly, but many of them even on a weekly scale. Because this will give you a much better idea of how are we doing versus our KPI. See, we can say all of this here that is below our target line. We need to launch our problem-solving teams on it. We need to rapidly do something about it. Might be true, although I actually love setting KPIs in such a way that you sort of expect about 30% of your results to be under the level, especially the really important KPIs. So with safety KPIs, maybe not, but with a leading safety KPI, like how many near-miss reports or unsafe situation reporting forms did the people on the shop floor fill in? Seriously, fill in? That you might want to put a goal up there. That is indeed, you say, well, probably we're only going to reach this goal about 70-80% of the shifts, of the days. So that from time to time we can also say, hey guys, come on, let's push it. Because a KPI that's always green doesn't really help us. A KPI that's always red, by the way, also really doesn't help us. So that's why I sort of accept this. But that is your daily process control, not performance control. If we have the pillars or other interest groups looking at this at a weekly, maybe monthly level, say, well, based on the performance, we actually do see that there are a couple of zones in there, our quartiles, we should be able to hit roughly that level. So we've got some potential here. Let's see if we can swap out some of the improvement resources we have to get this one up, because we do see things happening. We also want to know these higher performers, are those specific shifts? Is there maybe one team out of the 3 that we have that always performs a bit better? They might have a nice secret for us to understand. How can we also teach the other shifts the same? Is it any number of factors? So this is already a deployment, not just analyzing the data, but deploying it into where do we see potentials, where do we see versus internal benchmarking, how can we use the variation that we see in our results to sort of predict what would be possible to improve, what are proven ways of getting up to a higher performance level. All of that requires some human input, sometimes a lot. If you at least have the data gathering and your basic KPI setup and breakdown generated automatically, you will make this so much easier. You do not want your people spending all of the time on gathering and then cleaning up and polishing your data, putting it into a form that you can actually read. Anytime that your main loss deployment, those week-long, 2-week-long things that many companies do, if you see there that you have to really spend quite a lot of work cleaning up your data and pushing it into a format that you can use to do a good analysis, but also determining potential, improvement potential. These things themselves should also be improvement projects. So making sure that the data that gets into your systems is good enough that you don't have to clean it up, making sure that you can get it out in an automatic way, that you get those reports in an automatic way. Because if you can reduce the time spent on just getting data into the model, and data analysts will tell you that is also the bulk of their time in most projects, but if you can reduce that, you can spend that time on actually deploying into where is our potential and playing a lot closer to the ball, really being quick in your decisions and your reactions within your operation. So yes, please do go for continuous data gathering and putting that into your loss models, and make your loss deployment and your team planning more frequent, but not daily. The team planning probably not even weekly. This is a monthly, or if you really work in these waves, keep it roughly on the wave level, or maybe one logical frequency fewer. So if you do this every 3 to 4 months, make it a monthly loss deployment. It will greatly help you also to explain, remember, we should have made a budget out of our loss deployment and roadmap. Every month, the finance department generally wants to know what's happening. We can give them the financial numbers like we do right now. We can also give them our loss analysis, operational performance that led to the financial numbers. It's a lot stronger. You will see strong deviations. put serious problem-solving teams on that, you will also continuously update your where do I see potential. And you will make that yearly, or maybe now 3 times a year, main loss deployment so much easier. It means you can spend much more time understanding your process and the possibilities, the potential that you have, instead of gathering and cleaning all your data. So yes, clean it up, make that a Kaizen effort as well, to get your data into the formats that you like. Now, if you like that explanation, don't forget to hit that like button. And also, if you have any other topic about how do you vision, how do you analyze what teams you need, how often would you do it, or how do you organize setting up teams so that they serve your organization, let me know what aspects of managing continuous improvement would interest you for me to make new videos about. For now, I wish you the best of luck in your planning of improvement teams. And as always, don't forget to also enjoy the continuous improvement journey.